Hello, John. Thank you for coming back onto the show here. We have another interesting set of circumstances that are taking place in the world.
Indeed.
So, for the just to remind the audience, in the description of this video and all the videos I do with John, please click the link that will take you to his website and take a look at some of the periodicals. You can sign up for periodicals. You can also sign up for a reading. We'll talk about what those are, but it's really important that you help support the work that John does. This is a great way to do it. So please click the link. We'll remind you to click the link multiple times throughout this broadcast. But John, shares a lot of information about what's going on in the world, and you can benefit from the wisdom that he has. So please help support his work. So,
And
John, with
and
that,
also and also you can help right now by clicking the like button. It definitely helps the YouTube bring more people in. And the other thing too that I've forgotten to say that a lot of the sources that online that I follow, they say this also. They say this other thing. They say, yeah, take these links and share it with all your friends that have not seen the show before. If you got friends that you think might be interested in what Paul and I are talking about every other Sunday, share them with as many of your friends as you can. These links, or send them to where they can watch the main link, search link, where all of my things are there. All you have to do is write in Paul Cottrell, comma John Hogue, Hogue, and that all prompts up. I'm done.
so John, I mean, there's a lot that has transpired in the last 2 weeks with the war between the United States and Iran and Israel and Iran,
How many
Israel.
fingers do I have?
Right. There's a lot that's going on. So where do you want to start?
Well, let's start with something that's a little goofy. Um, although it's not a, it's prompted by something that could be tragic or history shaking. The Prime Minister of Israel, Netanyahu, has not been around in public. He has not appeared in the security conferences in the bunker. There are signs that his house had been attacked by Iranian missiles. I mean, the Iranians were basically, there's also word that perhaps Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, some of the really hardcore Zionists who are pretty vicious people, are either seriously wounded or dead from, the Iranians are saying, okay, if you're going to play decapitation with our leaders, the Iranians have this pattern. We don't do these things to you until you do them to us, and then we do them better than you. And so it's what has prompted up the last few days are I'm actually pretty good at reading when an AI figure is talking online. I don't know why, but it's just so there's been a couple videos out where there's Netanyahu speaking, and you can. What has happened is sometimes when he's talking, he's talking like this, and then suddenly he flicks his hand and he has five fingers and a thumb, and then he flicks it again, and it's back to four fingers and a thumb. Uh, and there's those usual ways. I mean, I can impersonate, like, let's say I'm going to now magically become an AI version of myself. And this is what would start happening when I'd be going like this, and the way that my mouth moves would be more blurry like this and a little faster, and then I would be doing things like this where I do these quirky little gestures where I go and I have six fingers and and so they whoever did it, so there was a fake of Netanyahu, which just make his first speech he's done in weeks, and and it was not a very good AI fake. I'm amazed at people that do AI spoofs, especially in Israel, are really sloppy about it. They don't. I mean, when the guy that's now retired, but the guy in the IDF who went into the ruins of the hospitals, into their basements in Gaza, and he was trying to show where all his stash and stuff was, and I mean, there were AK-47 stacked up next to a MRI machine, which means it's the last place you want to put a heavy metal gun because it'll go boom right into the machine from the electronic or the magnetism, and just stuff that was just so third rate. Um, I'm rather surprised that Mossad can be so dumb in those kind of things, but or it's the IDF maybe, but anyway. So a new one of Netanyahu in one of the places he likes to go in Jerusalem, West Jerusalem, to have a mocha coffee. And he's there, and it looks better. And this time he's saying, "Oh, look, see my hands? My hands are I have just five fingers, and everything's fine." And then, but then, then there's something so obvious. He's got a mocha coffee that's literally almost bubbling. It's right up to the top of the cup. So even if this were real, even if he was just doing this much of a move, it would be going splat, splat. And then when he does, almost like he looks at you and like, oh, like watch me, which he shouldn't do because that's leading it up. He's taking this absolutely full cup and he does this. And then it hasn't changed. It's the same size. And if he had done that, it would have gone all over him. And so yeah, they got the hands right. You caught us. But then the coffee cup's even more stupid. So um, that is not helping us wondering if he's either some words are saying that he's in a coma. Some are saying he's been dead and was killed. And six other generals were killed with him, including his older brother, who was in this meeting. And the other thing I'm learning from this is the Israelis are are very unwise not to, you know, the same problems happening with the Americans, especially when you're bullies. The concept of the bully, and I will just say it outright. I think the Zionist leadership they're a bunch of bullies. And and if you've got a kind of racist mentality, you just don't you just don't have any respect for the people that you consider as Untermenschen, as as goyim, as people, because the Zionist regime is one of the most racist, ethno-supremacist states since Nazi Germany. And the Nazi Germans used to talk about the same, in the same disparaging way of the subhuman Bolshevistic Jewish Soviets, in the Soviet Union. And in a way, there's a parallel here because, um, Netanyahu and Hitler have a lot of karmic echoing parallels. It's ironic that would happen that Netanyahu, a leader of the Jewish people of Israel, would end up doing what Hitler did to Semites, which Netanyahu doesn't even regard, and Israel doesn't even call Palestinian Semites. Have you ever noticed that, everybody? How they just anybody who knows the basic ethno history of the Middle East knows a bit of their Bible, knows that the seed of Abraham went to Ishmael, the founder of the he was the founder of the Arab race and the Hebrews. So, and I've said in earlier shows that one could argue the earliest statements attributed to Yahweh, to the Lord of hosts, talking to Abraham when Ishmael was already born and already in his late teens, ready for manhood. This is before Sarah became fertile again, and then Isaac could be born. But that's the famous part where all these areas between the two Euphrates and Nile rivers would be the land of his seed. Now, his seed at the time was Arab. It would later become, because certainly the seed of Abraham went into Sarah when Sarah had become fertile again. So it doesn't change those first statements. My seed, this, and the whole area that Zionist supremacists want to turn into Greater Israel. How bad a parallel is that? You know, the official name for Nazi Germany was Der Großdeutsches Reich. That means the Greater Germany, the Greater Israel. And it's interesting that as Hitler really wanted to go east, you know, the lion's share of the land of Greater Israel is east. So there's a parallel there. Um, I mean, it's just a little bit that goes up to the Nile because Israel, as we know it now, is just right there. Anyway, God said, as I understand it, all your seed, which means the Arabs and the Israelis and the Hebrews, this is your land, not just one, not just for the other, not one saying we're superior Semites than you. In fact, we feel so superior that we don't even regard you Palestinians and Arabs as Semitic, which is a classic sense of racist denial. And um, so basically, and I mean, it's even amazing to see. I was just writing some new passages for my new Hogue Prophecy report. It'll come out before April because it's really about April, and we'll talk about that, a little preview. But I've got links to shelters in Tel Aviv where where Christians and Arabs are wanting to come into the shelter, and there's a gatekeeper there saying, you can't come shelter, you're not clean. And he's actually saying that, and the woman's saying, who's a Christian, says, let us come in. And the guy just takes, he doesn't touch the man. He's not man enough to get violent with the man. He knocks down the woman first. And then the Christians are they just, no, 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 wait, calm down, calm down. The Christians are trying to keep this, he slapped me on this side of the cheek. I turned the other, but calm down, calm down. And, um, and yet at the same time, I just put a bunch of links in where, if, back to the parallel of the Soviet Union, I'll just get back into that. And when I make this other point about that, is how arrogant people in a collective bullying way do not respect their enemies to their great peril. The people who they identify. Not that the others saw them as enemies, but I mean, if you're waging aggressive war, I mean, this is what the United States is doing. We are literally doing the kind of aggressive war in the Middle East that got Goering hung and the surviving Nazi leaders hung at the Nuremberg trial. Well, Goering actually had the cyanide pill and escaped that fate. But the whole concept of aggressive warfare was the very root to the unique in history judgment at Nuremberg, where they were going to try to make it official in international law that to choose to fight a war against other people aggressively is um, uh, is immoral, because all the evil comes from that. If you're lawless, and remember that thought, because I'll tell you, there is nothing that President Trump has done in this whole process that's legal, and he hasn't even consulted Congress. And Congress is not pressing him to do that because most of those people, from several hundred thousand to several $1 million apiece from AIPAC, are completely bought and sold and are basically not our representatives anymore. They are Israel's representatives. So, so you've got a situation where Adolf Hitler, like Netanyahu has been a gambler, just like Adolf Hitler. He has a great parallel to that. And Hitler and they're both madmen, both psychotic, mad human beings. And what Hitler did was that Netanyahu and Hitler did the same thing. They got lucky because they did mad, unpredictable things. They didn't act in their military moves or political moves like moral, sane men. When people are usually invited to negotiate out a crisis, people come with their delegations. They never expected that Netanyahu would murder, and Trump would encourage, yeah, yeah, come to Oman in June. He said last June, he said, come to Oman. Yeah, we're so close. And it's True Social. He's saying we're so close to having a breakthrough, just encouraging the Iranian delegation to return. The following night, he killed them all and their families with Tomahawk missiles. Um, and Netanyahu has been the same. He said, "Yeah, we'll make a negotiation of peace," and he assassinates people. You know, Netanyahu makes sure that the head of Hamas, when he went to be there for the new president, Pezeshkian of Iran, who's in Tehran, he got assassinated. They made sure, with Mossad's help, MEK, CIA, ASIT, used some kind of drone that they launched a block away. And in downtown Tehran, where official guests live when they're visiting, Hania was killed. This whole thing started when, with no reason, Israeli jets launched in April Fool's Day 2024. This is when this missile war began. I mean, this 12-day, when people call that the 12-day war that happened in June, no, that's the 12-day campaign of this slow escalation that happened and it was started by Netanyahu and the Israelis. They flew into Syrian airspace, launched two missiles that hit the Iranian embassy and killed a bunch of people. Now, if you understand it, any embassy is actually the ground of the state. So if you blow up an embassy in international law, that means you have gone to war with that nation because you blew up their territory in that city. And so the Israelis brazenly did that, killed a bunch of people. And then the Iranians, a few weeks later, began the first demonstration, which ended up being four demonstrations of what they can do with their missiles. Very measured. They did it in the latter half of April, and then they did it again in early October of the same year, when another bunch of assassinations happened to a lot of Hezbollah people, and they responded with an even more forceful. And then finally, in June of 2025, um, when they did the first decapitation attempt to take out the Iranian government and scientists and all, then that was a complete Pearl Harbor, but it was also a wake up for the Iranians. They finally realized this: we have to fight these people, not talk to them. We have to fight these people. These people are out to destroy all of us. It's an existential threat. Now, so it got finally to that position, and they did a good job with Mossad and stuff, overwhelming the defense systems, and for about 18 hours with Russian help, they were able to clear out the bugs that were in the system. But for 18 hours, Israel was nailing them with all they had, and then after that 18 hours, the next week, they pounded them to almost to where Netanyahu was getting on the phone with Trump and saying, do something, make some gesture, get the Americans to get into this war, make some gesture, call victory, and do a little kabuki and stop. Because if you don't help us, we're going to go nuclear on the Iranians, because they are defeating us. They are pounding us really hard. Now that was bad. It's so bad now across Israel. The damage is so bad that the Israeli government, if they catch you taking videos of it, will put you in prison for 5 years. And but it's still leaking out, and I mean it's terrible. Now the Iranians are, I mean the Iranians are doing exactly what they've always warned. We're not listening, and they exactly then do what they say they do. Unlike U.S. and Israel, who are liars in this thing, never saying what they really are doing, sneaky. And so, what has happened now is the Iranians are have been struck about 2 weeks ago, and they got a little shock, the U.S. and the Israelis. Within 30 minutes, not 18 hours, within 30 minutes, the Iranians launched a couple thousand missiles, hitting all the U.S. bases, pummeling Israel, and all across the region, making it very clear that this will now be a regional war, as they warned. They said, we will bring the whole world into this war by shutting down the Strait of Hormuz and cutting off 20% of all the oil and a lot more of the natural gas from Qatar. And what has happened in these last 2 weeks is historically changing the whole course of history. The Gulf Arabs are done. The sheikdoms are not going to survive this. That's what I'm seeing. The whole idea of having a little playground for rich people in UAE and Abu Dhabi and Dubai, where these beautiful spiring towers, a little fantasy Disneyland for the rich and infamous. Um, the idea of them having safety, no taxes, everything's safe. We're safe here. It's clean. We got great beaches. That's gone. That's gone because and what's happened is every time when they started to hit the Iranian banks with missiles a few days ago, now the Iran is saying, okay, we are going to take out every bank in the Middle East. And so they've been bombing UA, all the banks are getting hit. Uh, and they're just saying, you people, just everything you do to escalate this, we hit you 10 times harder. And the other thing, so the this is kind of parallel. Netanyahu, before he might have been killed a few days ago, if he's still alive, um, had to face the fact that Hitler had to face the fact. Because just like Netanyahu, Hitler had taken out France. He had put England kind of on its island, and at least for a few years before they could really do anything. So he had this window to go east and take the Soviet Union, the Big Apple. Just like Iran had Hezbollah and Syria as its link into the resistance against what's happening in Palestine and what the Israelis have been doing to Arabs and Persians. And then Netanyahu collapsed Syria. That was pretty amazing. He collapsed Syria. He got Nasrallah and decapitated the leadership of Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. Now he's going to try to take South Lebanon, as I predicted he would, as part of the greater Israeli expansion, like he took all of the Golan Heights, including all of its strategic reservoirs, into Damascus. Um, so so he literally a few weeks ago, before this war started, Netanyahu openly stated, said, I have been waiting. This has been my dream for 42 years to finally finish this whole thing. Get Iran. Just like Hitler, and even in Mein Kampf, it was in Hitler, his main goal to get his greater German Reich, just like the main goal for Netanyahu's greater Israel, both fascist states, both ethnic supremacist states, viewing their targets as Untermenschen, as not worth any respect or any humanity. At the last step, Hitler hit the Soviet Union thinking all you have to do is just kick the storefront door, and the whole rotten edifice of Bolshevism will come collapsing. Well, it didn't. And even though the Germans had great success, the German soldiers, they were at their peak then. They were starting to talk about the ordinary Soviet soldier as something they never encountered before. Yeah, the French would fight and the British would fight, but they kind of knew when it was time to surrender. And but the Soviet soldiers, they hold their positions even though they're being completely overwhelmed. They fight like tigers and die like tigers. And it's a big country, and there's millions of them. So they started to talk, and similarly, the Americans never really respected who they were fighting with when they were fighting in Vietnam with the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese army. But in the same karmic echo of mistakes that are repeated in reverse image sometimes, the Germans used to talk about their opposites in the Soviet Union as what's Ivan doing today? With the same kind of grim respect and fear that we used to say, US troops in Vietnam used to say, well, Charlie's really got his stuff together. We got to look out when Charlie's got some plan. So we called them Charlie. We called the Germans called the others Ivan. And this is a sign of bigger powers who are going to lose the war, because I've got some links in these new articles that I've found of where you're not going to you're going to see Israelis cowering in bunkers. But if you go to Iran, where US bombs are literally falling on the demonstrations, those people aren't screaming, yelling, and running into bunkers. They're standing there with their flags, and they're yelling, Allah Akbar, Allah Akbar, with their kids, their families, the men, women. They are, and in their millions. If you watch mainstream media, you're not going to see that, in their millions, and they've been doing it every day, every night since this war started. I've got some footage where mushrooming clouds of major tomahawk blasts are rising, and they're just all still there. They're not running away from it. They're still like, hit us. We dare you. You fight those kind of people like you fight the Soviet soldiers, you're going to lose, because they have, like what Tolstoy used to talk about. The Battle of Borodino is a big part of War and Peace, his epic about the Napoleonic times and the invasion of Russia and all. And Borodino was the greatest single day battle in the 19th century for killing people. We had 120,000 Russians or maybe 128,000 Russians and 135,000 French. And in 5 square miles in 12 hours, they ended up having 72,000 casualties. It was a mess, because the Russians had 500 cannon, the French had 450, and everything was too tight together. It was literally like a shuttlecock game with horses and men, and it lasted for 12 hours. Somebody said that every 15, 20 minutes it'd be like a 747 crashing with full people on board. It was a terrible battle. And it's interesting because the Russians lost half their army, but they retreated in good order. They weren't routed. They gave only a handful of prisoners. Napoleon only captured 13 cannons. And capturing artillery was always a good sign of how bad you beat the other side, because they just left their guns and ran. The Russians didn't run. They actually, by surviving, they kind of won the Battle of Borodino and took a third of the French army down with them. And it's interesting to note that Tolstoy said this is a moral victory. When I was younger and I saw it, I was kind of more pro Napoleon, but I didn't quite understand, and I had to get older to understand what he meant. Is that there was when your enemy, when you invade, first off, that's a sin. when you invade another person's country, when you choose to take it from them, and then they fight back, you're already I say, in an immoral place. It's not grand what you are doing. It's evil when you're the invader. I mean, I remember there was a person that used to work down in I think he must have been a veteran. He's a good friend now, but I was talking about what had happened in Iraq, and he was talking to this other kid who was a cousin of his, and he was like, "Oh no, no! When they murdered Soleimani in 2020, he was a very evil man. He was just spouting the propaganda. He was an evil man, Soleimani, who used to be the head of the Al-Quds brigades, and he was assassinated by Trump in his first term. I mean, literally, the third highest leader of Iran was murdered, and he was on an errand of peace. He's the man that commanded the Shia militias in Iraq and Iran, who were the people responsible, along with Hezbollah and the Syrian army, of destroying ISIS and defeating them in a very bloody war that you hardly ever hear about because it's reality that our news agencies don't want to show you. They want to keep you stupid and then lead you by the nose into these disasters, which we are in. So this immorality, you're already on the wrong moral foot when you invade, when you literally decide to rob somebody else's house and take somebody else's land and just say, well, I'm better, I'll take it because I'm better. No, you're worse. If you're talking about these people being subhuman, you are behaving like a subhuman. You are turning your humanity on its head. And so the idea, it's interesting. I think Tolstoy was right. Napoleon's army never won the battlefield at Borodino, but they lost about 32,000 of their 130,000 men. And it they never quite recovered from that victory. They got eventually a week later into Moscow, and then the Russians emptied Moscow as they were coming in, and the governor of Moscow with some fire teams, they took out all the firefighting equipment. They set Moscow on fire, and in 5 days it burned down. So 4/5 of Moscow burned to the ground. And the firestorms were so bad that Napoleon and his entourage had to leave the Kremlin and get outside of the city and camp out because the firestorms were so great. So, I mean, um, you're dealing with an enemy who will do scorched earth. You want to take the land, they'll destroy it so that you don't have much from it. And when you fight in such pitched battles with people that you invade, you're going to lose. You lost the first step into their land. And so anyway, this man was upset about he was overhearing what I was saying about how Soleimani was the man who helped the two-thirds of Iraq's population is Shia Arab, and so they are cousin Shias with the Persians. And so what he was saying, well, this guy killed a lot of Americans. Yeah, he did. He was the guy that improvised the shaped explosives that blew up a lot of Humvees and blew up a lot of armored personnel carriers, and yes, many hundreds of Americans. But look at it from the Iranian view or the Iraqi view. Let's say this is an argument. If we put it into the American Revolution argument, you have somebody who's pro-British American, uh, which there were many. A third of the people in the 13 colonies were not for the revolution. And he was saying, oh no, George Washington, he's a terrible man. He's a horrible man. He killed so many of our men. And I would say, you mean he killed a lot of redcoats, right? Men wearing British redcoat uniforms who were invading our new country, who were invading our new country that declared its freedom, and they were coming to bayonet and burn us down and all that. An army of occupation. What were we doing there in Iraq in 2003? We invaded their country. They didn't ask. There was not a faction in Iraq that said, please save us from Saddam Hussein. We made a choice and we invaded Iraq. And we then, after invading it, we disbanded all the government and social services because they were run by the Sunni minority, which Saddam was part. Now, Sunnis in Islam are the great majority. There's 2 billion Islamic people. There's 260 million Shia. Most of them live in northeastern Saudi Arabia, where the oil is, or they live in Syria, the Alawites, or they're Houthis, Ansarallah, in Yemen, and they mainly live in the Persian regions of Iran. And those roadside bombs were killing invaders. The fact that they were our people, yes, that's sad. But then, why the hell were we there? And did it help the place? We were in a quagmire for 8 years. We wiped out $4 or $5 trillion of the U.S. Treasury. That was the beginning of this disastrous road that we've now come to the climax in this new war of choice the United States has done. Only in this case, our leaders haven't even gone through the motions of being civilized about it. I mean, Trump just had a brain fart one day and said, I'm going to invade. And the Congress kind of goes, okay. And then no procedure was done. There was. Are you aware that with all the stuff that's going on that's upending the world in this war, that that of choice, that there wasn't even a debate in Congress about it? At least George Bush had to go through the motions with the Patriot Act giving him a lot more powers, and that should be rescinded. After 9/11, this executive branch became much more of it was no longer the checks and balance of the executive branch of the president, the Congress, and the courts. The executive branch was given a lot more power out, and that was upsetting the structure of our Constitution's checks and balances. But now we've been invaded by a foreign country that has bought our leadership on both sides of the aisle. And so, I mean, we are a nation that's occupied by Israel. It has occupied our government. Our executive branch and congressional branch are completely bought. And you can just type in, and you'll find out. Just type in, well, how much money does every that is APAC is using as a front for Israel has given to all the senators and House representatives. And if you'll see the whole list of how much money that they've gotten. It's jaw-dropping. It's just like literally they've bought our government. So, if you wonder, and it's kind of scary because if people say too much about it, like Charlie Kirk at the end of his life, he was saying, man, and he loves Israel. But he says, I love Israel enough to criticize it, when it's going in the wrong direction. And what happened to him? In the last few days now, Tucker Carlson is being threatened. And I'm a little concerned for his safety. He may go the way of Charlie Kirk. I hope not. So, anyone who speaks up against this unconstitutional behavior, well, we have a government that's really not serving us. It's serving Israel. Um, so the problem is it comes again and again in history when people are hit by aggressive bullying nations, they eventually end up fighting somebody that fights back and they go down. Nazi Germany went down. Nazi Zionism will go down too. It is going down. This and by the way, if Trump wants to do a declare victory and go home, the Iranians have made it very clear that they dictate when this war ends. And here's the thing, they have been preparing for this showdown a lot better than their adversaries, their self-appointed adversaries have prepared. Here's some interesting math. We don't, no one knows except the Iranians how many missiles they have of all calibers. But my sense is telling me it's a lot more than we think. But let's like shoot out a number there that a lot of American mainstream news kind of likes to estimate. Let's say there's 20,000 missiles. And if we look at the rates of missile fire that happened in the June war, you're looking at around 3,000 missiles used a month. That means they're not going to run, they can fire day and night on Israel, on all the US bases until they're literally gone. And most of them are just ruins now. So devastated. And you know, we're in a position now we can't afford to rebuild them. I mean, literally, the Iranians are they're saying openly, we will not stop until the Americans leave Western Asia entirely. Otherwise, the oil spigot is off. And um, they have 60% support of the rest of the world that are really sick and tired of America and Israel and what they're doing. The world global majority is against us because we are the bad guys in this. Now we can live what it was like to be Nazis with the whole world fighting us, with our wars being illegal, unconstitutional, and bestial. And it's like, I'll give an example. This war started with an atrocity. It started with down in a Iraqi town that's in the Strait of Hormuz. It's in the Persian Gulf, and there's a naval base there. And for the naval base has been there. Well, the school has been there, and the naval base has been there since 2016. But what happened was, and Scott Ritter is my source for this because he knows how people researching things have changed. When he was an intelligence officer, there was more hands-on human eyes and human reasoning. But since AI has come, the the human eyes that can recognize too many fingers on a hand, where the machine doesn't, and many other things that are very key to the information not being accurate. Um, AI is taking over intelligence work. I'll give you an example. What will happen now is the AI program will be set up so that it will look at certain dimensions of buildings, and then those buildings will then be called by AI because of their size and how many people they can hold. They must be barracks. Do you know why the Iranians have closed all their universities and schools? Because AI has been sending missiles now for 2 weeks, wiping out schools. Elementary schools full of 300 girls aged 7 to 12 was the first one to go. And the reason is that there was no living human being watching the AI and going, oh, wait a minute. Why don't we look in the normal way of history and find out through open sources? They would have found out that in 2016 that those buildings next to the base had become a school for the girl children of the officers and men of the Navy officers and men of that base. So if there was a Scott Ritter in looking at that kind of stuff, he would look, oh, this program's wrong. We have to always check with our physical mind and eyes what our machines are telling us. these people aren't anymore. Um, and so, and then we would have found out that in 2016, this part of the base was bought and made into a school for elementary school age girls. And it was not part of the base. AI, but if you rely on AI rather than your own living intelligence, you end up launching, not only do you hit the base and strike the buildings, but these buildings where the kids are, you hit that too. So the first wave of Tomahawks missiles came in and they destroyed the school where the girls were and the teachers. The survivors trying to carry out the wounded and the kids are all freaking out and they're bloodied and they're carried them to the little mosque, the little prayer place that was where the girls used to go pray, doing the 5 days, the five prayers. And so we're doing this all over Iran, the double tap, which is really vicious. You take down a building, and when the people are trying to dig out their families, and when the ambulances and the firemen are trying to help and pull people out, we make the point of hitting it again with a bunch of missiles to kill all those people. We're wonderful people, aren't we? We're This is just disgusting. And this is how we do war now. We're the bad guys. And so the people that survived the first strike were all killed in the second. And not only that, but they had been calling on the phones that were still working for the parents to come and get their kids out of this target zone. So a lot of the parents, the wives and stuff, or relatives were coming to get their children out of there when this double tap happened and killed all them too. 160 girls, little girls, 7 to 12 years old, and another 16 adults were murdered. And there was no military target there. That was pure civilian. And that was happening all over Iran. So, so we started on the wrong foot of evil with this right at the beginning. And the other thing is that the Israelis, the very first missiles that they hit an Iranian target was the compound where Ayatollah Ali Khamenei and his family were. And I found out that Israel was putting out a communique that they were just about to break through with a peace treaty, just like they did in June. Oh, so they put that feeler out, and we're watching very carefully what would happen in the compound where Ayatollah was. Well, he he was there. He said to his people, "Look, I'm not going to hide in a hole. I'm going to if I'm 86. If it's my time, I'm going to go on doing my daily work, working in my office, doing meetings with people. And if these people have the gall to kill me, well, we are martyrs of God against Satan." And and so they the Satanists in Israel were saying, hey, they were making indications that they hoped would happen, that they might have a meeting there. Some people would come, and it's in the compound. The whole family is there in the compound. So the first 6 missiles from Israel wiped out the compound, killed Khamenei, killed his wife, injured his son, who's now the new Ayatollah, but he's still in the hospital, kills his wife, killed his family. You know, is this how you wage war, murdering civilians? Do you think the leadership of Iran, the leader of Iran, is going to say, oh, yeah, let's do peace with these monsters? What are they going to do? If we make peace, it'll be all right, right? No. What's been happening is there's this cycle. If you don't totally defeat them, that's the only thing that's left. So we have done with Iran what the Japanese did to us. If you want to get some idea of what's going on here, in 1941 in Pearl Harbor, when Admiral Yamamoto was on the Yamato with his staff, and they were getting the communiques of the strikes on Pearl Harbor. Tora, 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 Tiger, Tiger, Tiger was the code to go in. That means that they caught the Americans completely by surprise. Now, what was going on in Washington? You see, the Japanese naval officers and army officers were, in their own way, were following the code of Bushido, the code of the warrior, the samurai code of honor. And in Bushido, a samurai never ambushes somebody. He comes forth and said, prepare yourself, because it's below him and the honor of a warrior to just sneak up on somebody. That is, if a samurai did that and was caught, he'd commit suicide because he's not worthy to be a samurai. So Bushido was in play, and so the Tomura and his team in the Japanese embassy were trying to type out on a Japanese, from Japanese to English, the declaration of war that was supposed to be delivered to the Secretary of State of FDR's government before the strike happened. It was a modern 20th century way of saying, and we're going to honor ourselves by telling you we're coming before it strikes. But what happened was the typing took longer than normal, and the Secretary of State purposefully was late, made them wait. Uh, so for a long time, and what happened was the declaration of war was sent 45 minutes after Pearl Harbor was attacked. We lost over 2,000 sailors and Marines and Army, and killed, and 1,000 wounded. And all the battleships being sunk, the Arizona blowing up, with most of the dead were from the Arizona's magazines blowing up. I mean, if you watch Tora, 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 the movie, it's really quite accurate to what happened, and especially the scene where Admiral Yamamoto is, they're all praising him, his staff, and he just seems rather reserved about something. He knows something. They all calm down. He says, thank you. I just have heard word that our message to the Americans, our declaration of war, was not tendered to them and before the attack, but 45 minutes after we struck Pearl Harbor. And suddenly all the celebration just cools down, and they all know what this means. And he says, I cannot imagine. And he lived in America. He was a military attaché in America. So he spoke English. He'd been across the whole country and learning what, in fact, when the war was starting, he was telling the leaders of Japan, he said, how many cars do we make? 120,000? They make 800,000 cars a year. They have a power of economy that we don't have. And if we're going to win this war, we have to strike fast and hard, and we've got to beat the Americans in 6 months, or we will be utterly destroyed, because then they will bring their economic industrial power. Because, America at that time was like China is today, the superpower of economics, huge factories and all. The rest of the world was behind them. So, and we did take them down. But he said, I can't imagine something that would make the people of America more angry than us, like, attacking them by surprise. And he said, I fear that we've awakened a giant, which will be now given a grim resolve. And by God, in from 1941 to 1945, the very ship, the Nagano, that they were in, I think it was a Nagano. Yeah, it was a Nagano. Not the Yamato. Yamamoto was not built yet. But anyway, that ship was sunk in Tokyo Harbor, just half sunk in the harbor. Yamamoto was killed. All those officers were killed. Japanese armies were destroyed. The last two cities left standing, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, that were not bombed. All the others were bombed, burnt down. They used them, the Americans used them as a demonstration to Joseph Stalin. That's what Truman was trying to do, demonstrate to Joseph Stalin that we had this super weapon and to scare him. Stalin just puffed his pipe, went, interesting, because he already knew about it. And Truman literally delayed the Japanese after Berlin fell. And the Japanese, now they're all alone, Hitler's gone. The Japanese were going through back channels to the Secretary of State saying, look, we're ready to surrender. We've lost this war. We just have, we'll surrender unconditionally except for one thing. Please leave our emperor on his throne. You know, that's our only request. And we'll end it right now. That was May 1945. June, July, August, September. It went on for another 4 months, not because it needed to, but because Truman wanted to wait until he could play with this atomic bomb or two to make his point to Stalin. And he didn't give a damn that it killed millions of hundreds of thousands of Americans and millions of Japanese. He had to have his little ego trip. That's why I always wonder why my master Osho used to call Truman True Monkey. And you know, he was, as far as I think, he's a disgusting man, and for what he did. But then again, a lot of racism in the world. Even if you watch the series The Pacific, which is kind of Band of Brothers in the Pacific version, it really shows to what extent racism dominated both sides in the Pacific theater, just like it did in the Eastern Front, the two most vicious fronts of World War II. So we're being guided by our leadership into disasters that are going to affect your lives. Everyone, every American is going to have their lives changed by what is going down in the Straits of Hormuz as they have been closed. They're not actually closed. I actually predicted that they wouldn't be closed. I predicted that in my last report that the the um, the Iranians would well, there's two things they've said. They said, if you're not a friendly nation, we'll let you pay for your oil, but not in US dollars, in Chinese yuan. If you pay it in Chinese yuan, you can take your oil and go. But if you are a friendly nation, we will let you come and go as you wish, pay any way you like. So the Iranians are showing that they have a greater understanding of what's at stake than we childlike Americans seem to know. And this is the end of President Trump's presidency. He's very likely not to finish his term. I've always been saying I didn't think he would finish his term, but this is the end of that. This is going to cause a great political upheaval and economic upheaval in the United States and the world. It is also Trump is so desperate that he actually made a deal with the Russian president to lift the sanctions on oil so that the Indians get their oil from him. What he's literally done is handed Russians something like $150 million a day to $200 million a day profits for the next several weeks. And that will pay for all the money they've spent on the wars that they're involved fighting us through the Ukrainians. So it's a mess. It's a mess because Donald Trump is cognitively declining, and it's making him bring out more of his bad sides than before, as it often does when people start to lose their minds through old age. And none of what he's done is legal. none of what he's done is constitutional. He's he's a man that's openly saying, and I think it's certifiable for the 25th Amendment. He is saying, well, my morality is, I trust my morality more than the law. What morality? That's why we kind of jokingly, it's kind of gotten all over the world. He likes Operation Epic Fury. He says, "Oh, that's a good name. I like that name. I really like that name. That's good." Well, um, what most people are saying around our world is it's Operation Epic Epstein. I mean, it's something that started, one of my sources in Iran is where I first heard the ideas. They just call this American regime the Epstein regime because, and then, chased by the fact that the first people they kill are a bunch of girls. Epstein is not what you would call a friend of womanhood, but an exploiter of womanhood. Well, so it's now the whole world's looking at us, and a lot of the alternative media is calling Trump the head of the Epstein regime. And maybe he is, why he's bought off and sold. They've got him, they're blackmailing him somehow, but he stepped in and did all that immoral stuff. And here we are. So are there any questions or comments?
There are quite there is a question here. John, do you feel that this is the end of the American empire and the petrodollar?
Yes, it is the end of American empire, and it's going to be a rapid decline. The rapid decline, and watch what's coming next month. Um, I call the chapter of the new Hogue prophecy report the apocalypse. The apocalypse. It's a tongue twister, but the like April lips. It's April is going to be apocalyptic. Very possible. We may not get through April without nuclear weapons being used. This is the window. Since their atomic bombs and nuclear weapons may actually be lit off. The problem, if I can keep it as succinct as I can, is conventional means of waging war that Israel is using and exhausting, and the United States is exhausting, is literally creating a situation where the level of, we're taking THAAD radars and batteries out of South Korea and putting, the others have been destroyed. I mean, the multi-billion-dollar radars have been taken out by the Iranians to the point that the whole area is blacked out. And people that are hearing the alarms in Tel Aviv are hearing them 1 minute to 5 minutes before the missiles come down, when they had 20 minutes, 10, 20 minutes. The Iranians have systematically taken out all the radars, very expensive stuff, and would take years to rebuild. The port where the Fifth Fleet is in Bahrain is toast. And they're taking out all the banks because we were taking out their banks. Um, Trump is, what hour it is when his new plan is. There's no plan. They're improvising. They walked into this thing basing all of their moves, including the Israelis, on what they wanted to think their enemy was like, not how they are. Just like Hitler did with the Soviets. And it's not working. Um, Racism has its karma. If you view your enemy as subhuman, you're not going to recognize your efforts to be yourself subhuman. And you'll get yourself in big trouble. I mean, we're talking about levels of defeat that has not been seen since Nazi Germany was taken down. Only it's us now. And the Israelis. The survival of the Israeli state may not make it through next month. because it's what can I say? It's just when the Israelis bombed the storage oil fields that were outside of Tehran, and that unleashed an apocalyptic pall of black smoke. It literally blotted out the day. And it looked like right out of the apocalypse. And then a rainstorm mixed with it. And 13, 14 million people of Tehran were under an acid rain of black rain, of oil rain, uh, toxic, putting everything under toxic rain, all those millions of people. So what did the Iranians do? They took out Haifa's oil reserves of the Israelis. It's all gone. They started attacking somebody. UAE allowed some missile to go and hit some American missile, I suppose, to hit the water purification installations that are used by Iran. So Iran said, okay, it took out their water purification systems in UAE. In another week, they might run the Gulf states, the Emirates, might run out of water and food. They won't be able to live there because only 8% of Iran's population does water purification, but 80% of the UAE, 80% of Saudi Arabia. That's the other thing. Saudi Arabian those airfields were destroyed by Israel because they said you're using them, your radars and stuff to hit us. So that whole attempt to make détente between Saudi Arabia is over. And now Saudi Arabia is which is intriguing in the sense of Nostradamus' prophecies because I consider the crown prince now for the last several years to be after trying to find who might be Mabus, Mabus, the third and final Antichrist. He covers all the steps that Nostradamus placed, including being a world leader. And Mabus, this is a classic Nostradamian where you take the A and U out. He strips sometimes vowels and gives you the consonants and mixes them up. But he didn't even mix these up. They're in their order, if that's what it is. MBS is the acronym that everybody calls Mohammed bin Salman, the crown prince. But Mohammed and bin Salman, they also, using Nostradamus's anagrammical codes, they also very easily break down into Mabus, which I show in detail in my book Nostradamus and the Antichrist, code named Mabus. Now, I was updating that book, but I kept feeling I got to stop updating it because something is about to happen that's really going to be the final act of the third Antichrist, whoever he is. If he's Jolani, who's creating an Islamic state out of Syria, killing hundreds of thousands of Christians, or it's bin Salman, the crown prince who will become the Arab king anytime now. And so I've stopped working on that. I'm gonna have to wait. If we're all still here after this war, I think we'll be here, but I can't really. I think the final act of him being the third Antichrist is maybe coming now. So I had to put that one aside and keep watching because if he is the person, then it, Napoleon and Hitler, Napoleon or Napoleon and Hitler, who's called Hister, they died at the end of their empires. But third Antichrist is unique. He's one of the first casualties of what would be a 27-year war that is triggered by his annihilation, his physical annihilation, which kind of sounds a bit modern, like had a missile go through his window or something. Because like destroyed his body, everything. So, and it happens during a time when there's a great unraveling of the world of people and animals. Climate change. And he only uses that phrase once. And then he talks about, it always comes up with the third Antichrist that to mark it with some pandemic in the future. Well, we've had one just before all this started. The other thing too is that the prophecies of Nostradamus, I think it's Century 9, Quatrain 55, um, where he talks about when there's this great pestilence when the West is preparing a war to wage a war, and it's kind of left open, but obviously, though, if the whole West is starting to prepare for waging a war, it's against the East. It's not against the South. It's the East-West clash of civilizations. So I contend. Now, what's interesting about that, we had the pandemic. The pandemic's cure has probably killed more people than the pandemic itself. And I've had to also put that book aside. I finished most of it in 2020, but I had this remarkable book. It's really in the clear. Nostradamus, as the plague doctor he was saying stuff. And I'm not somebody who easily just follows the shape in the cloud that I think is what the cloud is about, the cloudy verse. It's what's kept me a long time popular in this field. A lot of people consider me the number one authority living in the world today in Nostradamus. And it's because I don't fall into the traps that most other my colleagues fall into, where they just are looking for what they're wanting to find unconsciously. I don't do that. But I was really shocked to see how so many things were in the clear about the pandemic in the early 2020s. And also hinting that man-made plagues that were even greater would come out of it. The estimates are that the the cure, the vaccine, has killed as many people as World War I all across the world, and it's still going. It's possible that a lot of people who took too much of the cure are almost assured to have short lifespans, lose a decade or two. There are turbo cancers and other things that are coming up that are just hitting young people, children and teens and young adults, the kind of cancers that only hit when you're old. There's a lot of, and this book is so kind of controversial because of its accuracy. I had to sit it down and wait and see if I could just back it up with a lot of data. And I almost got it published, but now we're turning into another kind of dark witch hunting period where even the data, even if you're somebody who's got the data, Amazon will probably ban all my books just because of that. So I am going to publish it, but it will only be published through my own publishing house and be available through my website. But so anyway, so what was the other question or comment that somebody wanted to make?
Well, new, that's his handle.
Uh,
New had a question.
I'm old.
No, he's new.
Okay.
But his question is states, do we have balls to face our enemy?
Well,
I'm going to kind of rephrase this question that he wrote here. My observation, especially at least through the last 10, 15 years, is that I find that much of the population in the United States, even though they have freedoms, they have a lot of prosperity, they have a tendency to not be willing to fight for those freedoms
yeah.
or to be thankful for the prosperity that we have. And there are many people that have served our country that has allowed us to have the prosperity that we have and the empire that we have and have the hegemonic power that we have. My concern is that because of the Iranian war and the news that popped up today about Taiwan and China. China is moving ships and jet fighters encircling the Taiwan
I've
area.
been predicting that it would start with an embargo like
So
this
this is
years
not
ago.
just an Iranian. This
No.
is not just
This is a world
operating.
war, by the way, folks. This is World War.
Yeah, yeah. And let me go to the other side of this.
Okay.
So Neil Ferguson was asked a question. He's part of the Hoover Institute now.
Yeah, he used to be with Newsweek. I
So
used to I used to
so,
consider him a source until he kind of went off the deep end.
so he was asked the question: Are we in Gulf War II or three? I guess it's Gulf War III. Gulf War III, or are we in World War III? And he said Gulf War III. I
That's
think
why I don't read him anymore for
I think
decades.
we're in
He's
World
a
War III.
dummy.
I think we're in World War III because you can see if Iran was just contained, then you wouldn't see all these nodal connections to other regions of the world. Let me give you an example.
Yeah.
So, like what you brought up, Trump was saying, well, we're going to ease the sanctions, allow for Russia to sell oil to India. All right. But with higher oil prices, Putin's going to be making more money, and Putin will be able to use that for his war effort in Ukraine. Another nodal point, the Hornets. Zelensky wants to sell them to the United States to knock out the Shahed drones. So what I'm seeing here is that Operation Epic Fury is not contained. It's not a self-containing regional conflict. It has nodal points around the world that if this gets out of control, maybe it's already out of control. I don't know. I mean, when you're starting to blow up refineries and oil reserves and all this, the whole economy, the whole world could
To
freeze up.
sabotaging the energy systems of the world.
Right. And, a lot of people don't realize that our
Self-destruct.
modern society is heavily predicated on oil, plastics, making chips. Our modern society would come to a halt, and we would snap back into the 1700s.
Yeah, because urea is also made out of oil, and that's a prime component for fertilization. In 6 months, we may have 30% less urea than we need to feed the world.
Right. So let's take this one step further. Not just do we have nodal points for, quote, a world war that are tied to Iran and China and Taiwan and Ukraine and Israel and Lebanon, right, or Syria, but we also have been experiencing, especially in the Midwest and the Eastern Seaboard, temperature changes, precipitation changes in just the last few weeks that are unprecedented.
They are.
They're rare. Or, this is a very, very rare thing that's happening.
It's not so rare anymore. It's only
Right,
rare now because people aren't reporting it, but it's all over the place. This climate is unloading fast.
Right. So what's happening is that we're having a lot. We're having saturated areas, with precipitation. So we're going to miss the seeding cycle.
Cycles
on top of not having the fertilizer because of this potential shutdown with the refineries. So if the Strait of Hormuz isn't opened up, or some other way to get oil out of that region, if that's all clogged up, within a few weeks, the refineries are going to have to shut down. And that means that within 4 months or so, we're not going to have fertilizer.
Well, and also when you shut down, when you do a force majeure, I mean, a lot of this has never been done before, and no one really knows how long it will take the refineries and the natural gas refineries to start up again. So,
Right, right. Well, that's another thing that a lot of people don't understand is that the refineries are fine-tuned for certain types of feedstock, certain types of viscosity of crude. Not all crude is created equal.
no,
And even if you get the crude out of the Middle East, there's different grades of crude from
that's right.
Saudi Arabia or from Iran. So when they get their crude, when the refinery gets the feedstock, their refinery is fine-tuned based on that density of crude.
Yep.
So it's not something that you can swap between what the United States has
No.
versus what Iran has. So once they shut down those refineries, it can't be booted up right away
Yeah.
because you have to slowly you have to slowly turn it back on and then fine tune it to be able to make the downstream products.
Yep.
So if the refinery shut down, it's months to reboot it.
Yeah.
And a lot
But
of people don't get this.
no, most people are not educated. They're functional illiterates, and
And even
so
strategic reserves. The
yeah.
thing, maybe
Well,
28 days supply, maybe 30, maybe
well,
it be let's just give them the benefit of the doubt and it's 60 days supply.
yeah, or
It's still
90.
not going to be enough.
Well, what we just did, thinking, uh, Joe Biden in his 4 years to keep gas down, especially for elections, did not refill the U.S. strategic reserve, and it should be to be comfortable. It should be 600,000 barrels of oil. He left it at 400 when he left office. Trump said he was one of the many things Trump said he was going to do, but didn't,
Right.
is he didn't replenish it.
Well, you
And
can't
we
do
just put 100,000 barrels into the market from that strategic reserve. So we're down to 300,000 now. And it didn't do anything, didn't change the stock market at all. So we've got idiots running the country. We've got a demented president, the second in a row, um, who, in the middle of an important news conference, suddenly gushed about how beautiful the yellow, the golden drapes were in his office. We're going to have a lot more of those disconnects happening.
So for the ones that have been paying attention to our shows, we've been talking about
Yep.
this Rosh Hashanah and it coinciding with the Sabbath.
Yeah.
And there is a Jewish law that states that you can't blow the shofar on the Sabbath
Yeah.
for Rosh Hashanah. And you blow the shofar to silence Satan. All right. So when you silence, because it's the new year, you're silencing, so you're allowing for a blessing to come down, some good fortune to come down for the next year, because it's the new year. But when the shofar isn't blown, there's a curse that comes down.
Yeah.
All right. Now, the curse can be at a personal level, it could be at a community level, a countrywide level, or a worldwide level. And if you pay attention to what has been going on in the news, it seems to me that there's so much infighting between different religions, between people within the same religion, between uh, right and left, ultra conservative versus ultra liberal. There's so much infighting that is happening around the world that the blessing that we've had with modern society and the um, the the um, the comforts that we've had are going to be taken away, and people are going to actually start feeling what it means to be poor. No one's,
And
very
hungry
few people are in absolute destitute in the
and
United.
thirsty.
Right, yeah. So now we've been thinking in terms of, oh, America, I'm pro America, I'm pro America. I mean, there's no
I
doubt.
love this
But
country. This country
but the
gave us
thing
the
is that
greatest constitution, you know.
but the thing that I noticed during the COVID years was that people didn't fight for their constitutional freedoms, and they let the government roughshod them. And then when there was Infamil that wasn't available, the mothers weren't even willing to to stand up and push back on Biden's administration. All right. So if you're not gonna revolt because you can't feed your kid, if you're not gonna revolt because the government is forcing a solution during a pandemic that wasn't tested, then what are you really going to fight for? We're at a point that God is basically saying, look, there was an event that took place on October 7th. There were some nefarious things that were going on with the Israelis at that time too. But the thing is that it was a test. All right? Because God allowed it to happen. God could say, even what Netanyahu was doing, God could have prevented October 7th to happen. But he didn't, because he was going to see what society within Israel and within the world was going to do.
But remember,
And we all failed.
but remember, yes, but remember also just this little interjection. God also loves the Palestinians, for they
Right.
are also the
Right.
seed of Abraham,
Well, that's
and
the
putting
point.
them in an open air concentration camp for decades with denied freedom of access to anything, and then cutting the grass, killing them or purpose. God also is feeling that too. So
Right, right. But the point I'm making is that the world has failed. The Palestinians failed, Hamas failed, the Israelis failed, the United States failed, Russia failed, Ukraine failed, the Chinese failed, Taiwan failed, the Japanese, everybody failed. Everybody. That no one is getting away out of this one. So because everyone has failed, the curse that's going to be coming down on September 11th in 2026, going all the way into the first week or second week of October of 2027, is going to be unleashing hell. Now, I don't have a crystal ball, but my gut feeling with the way I'm seeing this is that if something doesn't de-escalate soon, we will have World War III, and the United States is going to lose our hegemonic power, not just in the Middle East. We're going to lose our hegemonic power in the Pacific, and our way of life will radically end. Will radically end. So everyone that thought that they can have their, football and their, Domino's pizza and everything's going to be hunky dory and it's going to end, and we're going to be heavily in debt. Most likely tactical nukes will be used, and we will have lost the blessing that we had when we ended World War II. And the problem was is that Americans didn't wake up and be thankful for what we had, and we became hubris, and now it's time to pay the piper. And I think we're in a window of about 3 to 4 weeks to dial this back, or we will have a war that this world has never seen before. And no one, I don't care what religion they are, what country they're from, how good of a person or bad of a person they were, everyone is going to feel this. No one's going to be able to hide, because we
okay.
all failed. Every single one of us has failed on this. That's what I think is going to happen. And the countdown date, the actual fuse will be lit on September 11th, 2026. And every American is going to start feeling what it means to be poor.
Yeah. Well, in a way, it's the only way you can recover from your mistakes is go through the travail of the consequences of them. And I would say that the impact will be far worse on the West than on the rest of the world, because we're so isolated even about this. There's one of the most significant positive things that's been happening is the very reason why the West has tried to destroy it, and that is that the global majority has has finally had enough with all the sanctions and the toxicity of the US dollar. They've had enough with us. And they have, in the last several years, set in motion, not because they wanted to, not because they hate the dollar or hate us. The dollar is hateful. It is being used to keep people down. And so, and the people that have been shepherding us through this, interestingly enough, are the Chinese and the Russians. And, I would differ with you in some of this feeling about, if you look at what Russia is like, the real Russia is like, it is a very spiritual country. The Russian people have not made the mistakes that we have. They have, they are still a very soulful country. And I now am seeing actually being fulfilled the famous Edgar Cayce prophecy about Russia being the hope of the world. Now, to say that in is like being Job in Sodom and Gomorrah right now, because trying to find an honest man, because it is. I can feel it. People go, what, you bastard, you evil bearded weirdo. Okay, prophecy is a dangerous business because if you're good at it, you kind of get the impact of people resisting what you're saying because they have their expectations of how their future should run. We all do that, but the difference between that and an accurate prophet is an accurate prophet has their wishes too, but they have their gift of seeing things. And if you're more accurate, you will be shunned. Good prophecy always suffers the Cassandra curse. Cassandra was this great prophetess in Greece, and everything she said always came true, and no one listened to her. I mean, I am personally going through some interesting times with places that I've been appearing when all this was far away, when the roaring 2020s was a quarter century away. Everybody just got so entertained, had a nice little fun, like I was a horror book to read, and loving to be scared for entertainment until now. Now, when we entered the 2020s, and so much of what I've warned about is now happening, one by one, all my main shows where I was broadcast all over the United States, like Coast to Coast AM, I mean, George Noory openly said on the air, one of the last shows I did, he said, we've known you for 20 years. Sometimes what you say really scares me. It was very honest of him. It was beautiful of him to say. And he said, all these years you said things that have really scared me, but I can't deny the fact. And he said it as bearing witness across all the airwaves. You're remarkably accurate. Now, I've always been trying to give alternatives. In my writings and stuff, I'm always trying to say, okay, here's how you can make an alchemical change of this. This is how, there's a good side to what's going on here. I mean, how could how could the Israelis and the two kingdoms not recover their virtue if they did not go through the Babylonian captivity? And then in those days, a Persian emperor who loved the Hebrews helped them rebuild their country, Cyrus. How ironic this karmic echo is that now the very same Persians who the prideful Israel, that's the kind of Israel that Jeremiah was saying, repent, repent, before the Babylonians conquered them and had to wait until the Persians conquered the Babylonians to be freed. This is a repeat of that. And Israel is going down. Second diaspora is going to happen from this. It's already happening. It's I've said years ago, I looked at the astrology. I started talking about the astrology of the Israeli state when the embassy of the United States was moved by Trump in his first term to West Jerusalem, going against what the world, because of the issues that are disputes with the Palestinians and all, that most of the embassies now are still in Tel Aviv. But he made a big show about moving it to, which in the very least shows how much he's completely a tool of Zionist people for whatever things they've got on him. It's not just the hundreds of millions they've given to him, which he's admitted, but he's their he's their bitch, and and he does what he should, and it's all immoral and not good, and so. Um, But I saw that as the golden calf moment without some tablets being thrown at it. It's still there. I mean, and I did a comparison of the birth chart of the embassy being set up on that day, on the anniversary of the Jewish state, or just a few days after, I think. And I compared it to the chart of the Jewish state, and I was seeing, I mean, Rabbi Ariel Zadok is a colleague of mine, a very gifted seer in the Kabbalist traditions. You've you've probably seen him on some of the shows I've been on, like if you saw the show where I predicted the towers were going down in 1996 in Fox called Prophecies of the Millennium. He was also on that show. And before 7th of October started, he rarely calls. He only calls when it's something significant. And so I went, oh my God. So you're feeling it too, he's also seen a lot of what you're seeing, Paul, about the shofar and all of that. I'm sure he's watching that now. And we were seeing this years ago that no, this is going to be a second diaspora. He's a Torah rabbi, I believe. So yeah, it's and then there's even the possibility. I mean, if one thing that's going to happen now is they they killed the Americans and the Israelis killed the Ayatollah that was against nuclear weapons. Well, whoever survives this war as Ayatollah is going to make them because not because they want to. It is haram in the Islamic world. Even during the Gulf War, when the United States was helping Saddam Hussein make mustard gas, kill hundreds of thousands of Iranians, Iranians came to Ayatollah Khomeini, the first Ayatollah of the Iran Republic, and said, "We've got to build these." And he said, "No, it's haram, it's evil. This is not, we have to fight justly in war if war must happen." And he said, "No." And so they did toy with it a bit to see what would happen, but then Khamenei, his successor, in 2003 said, "No, we can't do this." However, the fatwa, the holy writ that prevents that, can if you read the law, the jurisprudence of Islam, the it can be amended if a situation changes. In Islam, they say, well, we're not going to be stiff and dogmatic about this. If we're in a situation where people are using such weapons against us, we will have to build them as deterrents. If the Israeli Zionists want to make a Samson option out of this, where they try, if they're going to, which is possible, where they'll launch their nukes and take the whole Western Asia with them, oil and all. And that's a real possibility with these nut jobs that are running Israel right now, who are getting slowly taken out. And the time is coming where I think we're very close to the Samson option being committed, or at least one or two nukes being launched onto Iran. But here's the thing: you can launch two, you can launch 20, because that's another number that's up. It's a big country, and if you think that will stop the missiles, you're going to have the nastiest surprise. If anything, the Iranians may not have a nuclear weapon, but they conventionally are destroying Israel. And they have enough of these missiles. I think they have 100,000 of them, which means they could launch for 2.7 years. Those 2 years being where the shofar is not being blown. The next Jewish year, September, October, and the one after that. And I've been saying to my readers that I started saying in New Year's time in January that these 24 months, these 2 years, 2026, 2027, are a reckoning years. These 24 months will see more changes in human history than in hundreds of years. And it's already now set in motion. And what's going to be a trigger of it, astrologically, which is what I'm going to delve in some more. I already laid out a lot of my so far very accurate predictions about the astrology, but we're not in April yet. So my next set of articles, which will be released before April, is going to look at deeper now, because as we get now in, when your predictions are starting to be accurately pointing to a certain direction, what happens is as events become closer, they become clearer. You start to see, oh, that's what it's about. Now, I've had a long experience of this. I've had it with just the whole Iranian theme. My last set of February predictions were looking at an overview, a distillation with chapter and verse and dated and everything of everything, all the things I evolved on this war with America and Iran and Israel. For 43 years, I saw it. I started seeing it in 1987, 86. And I'm sorry to say that it's been a remarkably accurate road I've taken, and now here it is. Here now I don't like it that it's here, but I have to accept it. It's the burden of being accurate, and it's also a hard thing because you can see it coming. You do your best to help people see it. They don't listen. They can even hate you for it, what you're saying, because they don't want to face things and change the direction they're going. And it's been quite an interesting journey spiritually for me to be acceptant of that. And I am accepting of that. But it's sometimes been hard. And, my life's been threatened truth is a dangerous thing for people who are not wanting truth. And what's so key in this stellium that's happening in next month is that for about 3 days in the third week, I think, of this next month, the moon and the sun will take part in it, but they don't have much influence on it, fortunately. What the main core of it is, you've got Mercury, you've got the sun, the moon for a few days, but the main body of planets in the stellium you got to look at, because they're slow and long in this, is you've got Mercury, ruler of mind as the message. If it's afflicted, the wrong messages. Um, you've got you've got Mars, the god of war. You've got Saturn, the reality giver, and is only a grim reaper for those who do not want to face reality. So if you're now that grimness is coming because of all this time and energy that you've very eloquently set up a while back there. People will curse Saturn rather than say, show me how I got here. Show me my sins, so my limitations. Saturn is not the limiter of truth. If you feel cornered and limited and by Saturn's five, it's because you're not on the right path in your life. You're not centered in your life as you were have the potential to be a Buddha, to be an awakened one. No, you hell is what you make of life. For the Buddha, it's a paradise. For the sinner, it is hell.
John, let me just interject here. Something that popped in my head just while you were talking was Trump is has a tendency to be overconfident. He thinks he knows
Do you
better,
think?
but he has a tendency to be overconfident. And even his chief of staff said the same thing.
Yeah,
Different,
she's a piece of work.
but Trump has a tendency to be overconfident. All right, but he's a blessed individual. I think that there's a blessing that's placed on him. I don't know
Mhm.
why. He's not an intellectual. He has a lot of street smarts.
I can
But
tell you why. It's in his astrology. He has incredible luck powers in his astrology. I want people want to read my book, Trump for President: Astrological Predictions. I detail out how he has the luck.
maybe you see this in the chart too. But my feeling with Trump is that because of his hubris, and he thinks that because he was successful with Venezuela, that he'll be successful and it was going to be a short operation, knock out the supreme leaders,
Yeah.
and then the IRGC would just fall or collapse. Well, it didn't. And because of his hubris and the luck that he's had all of his life, it was a trap that set this in motion where that if he tries to pull out, he personally will look like he failed. The Republican Party will look like they failed and they will
They're
lose.
not looking like it. They
Right,
are failing.
right. But the point here is that it's a trap. He can't get out now. So now he's forced to escalate. And then this escalation will lead to the oil disruption that will force the hand of China to make their move because a lot of their oil is coming out of Iran. So you can see that within this timeline that we've set up here, that we've talked about, that it could rapidly get out of control.
Yeah. Well, the thing
And
is, it's important.
Trump can't just pull out now because
Now,
he'll
let
look
me
like he failed.
let me interject. It's very well put, and the problem about Trump is not the consequence of his being over um, his positive thinking being pathological, because that's really his faith. He was that famous guy in New York who used to be the power of positive thinking, who was a preacher kind of. And his family they used to go every Sunday to him. He's a famous evangel of this concept, and so his whatever kind of religion he got totally into that. And I talk about it in the book. But his greatest danger is the things that are going on with his Libra planets struggling in the sign of his very powerful empathic channel, but it's wide open and easily manipulated by evil people. I mean, I don't know how many you call them devils on his shoulders, whispering praise and pumping up his vanity. Oh, you're such a great leader, and my God, your doo-doo doesn't stink like everybody else. And what happens with him is Trump, long story short, his whole book about his chart. Trump is right when he says, on rare occasions, openly on television, you can see it on 60 Minutes in 2015 or 2016 during the campaign. He suddenly stopped. His face got very innocent and open. And he said, I've never changed since I was 8 years old. I'm still exactly as I was when I was 8. Now, there's two kinds of 8-year-olds. When things are going well for him, his 8-year-old can kind of make those wonderful truthisms, where he says, "You're fake news." That's the 8-year-old coming out. The emperor's naked, and he had a lot of that going on when he wasn't going to med as much as he is now. Um, so there's the other child, which is a brat and spoiled and demands and expects everything to go his way. And if he gets into a temper tantrum, he may throw a nuke at somebody. Um, and everybody's that's around him. I mean, people get hard on Tulsi Gabbard, but when I tune into her and the vice president, who are now those two are completely left out of what's going on now. And people say, "Oh, she's betrayed us because she's still staying in here." No, no, you are wrong. So wrong. I understand the feeling when people say that. No, she's there. She's there even taking the hit of if she goes down with the ship, it's the end of her career and all that. She is literally there to keep truth somewhere in that cabinet of Donald Trump. And that's what I sense. She's staying in there because I mean, and then as Scott Ritter, who interacted with her sometimes before she was, he sometimes she would ask him questions and stuff. So she's tuned into the alternative media. So is Vance. I think JD Vance even watches the Greeks, the Duran.
Well, JD Vance needs to watch our show. So,
Yeah, well, I'd love to talk to him. I tell you, my source is somebody that comes on. Robert Barnes comes on their show and some other shows. Robert Barnes is a friend of JD Vance, and he's very good at he's a really hot lawyer. He also did some work for Trump with lawyer. I highly recommend you watch him. He's a fast shooting, fast speaking guy, brilliant. Very good at forecasting, but he does it more in the buying and the betting on the future. He's very good. He's got some of the
you
gift
want to
there.
hear, you want to hear something that no one has said at all that I know of. All right. So let me have that as a caveat. So this is going to be, I think, breaking news. All right. I personally think that Trump is a Freemason, and Trump signaled to people that make decisions, because we don't make decisions through our electoral college, especially when it comes to who's going to be put on for the primaries. All right. So there's a group that has been signaled by those shoes that were bought and the shoes that were oversized for for Rubio. He was signaling that he doesn't want JD Vance to win the primary. He wants Rubio to be the next president.
That's because Miriam Adelson told him that she wanted Mario Rubio.
That I didn't know. I
Yeah,
didn't.
no, that he's there. Actually, he doesn't like him. I remember little Mario with the little hands problem. Trump hates the guy personally. He's there because Miriam Adelson said, if you want this money, make him your Secretary of
Well,
State.
but the thing is that I think the shoes that were purchased for the staff and it was oversized for Rubio, it was a signal to the ones that are making the decisions that the one that's going to be
Filling his shoes.
filling his shoes, right, will be Rubio, not JD Vance.
Well, I don't think
I
that
think
would
there's a
happen.
problem between Trump and JD Vance actually. Yeah.
Well, yeah, yes, because he's even mentioned it a bit. We take different views on these problems, which is putting it lightly. JD Vance, and there's been a lot of false stuff coming out about JD Vance, which Robert Barnes really clarified, is that Vance is not on board with this. Vance and Tulsi Gabbard are the two people who are speaking reality in that crazy cabinet of his. And that the gatekeeper, the lady who's running it, she used to be employed by Netanyahu. She actually ran his election. So she is deep into the Zionist situation.
Hmm.
And she's literally a gatekeeper. She makes sure certain people don't get to see Trump anymore at any time. And Vance and Tulsi Gabbard are kind of in that They're they're the last sane people in that administration who are trying to do something. They're ready to ruin their careers um, because I think they kind of understand that there won't be a future career if these things really could go as bad as they go, and it could happen next month. The level to which Trump's Trump has been in this long spiral astrologically, where a dark night of the soul for a long time, but it gets worse in this new year. And the stellium, the where Saturn's affecting his chart is the way the U.S. chart is being affected by this curse that he has that Biden, no, not Biden, but all the other presidents of this century has had. He has it, but he's fortunate it's not in his birth chart like Obama and George W. Bush. And it's basically self-delusion par excellence. It is the square of Sun with Neptune. He has it with the U.S. birth chart, though. So his Gemini essence is almost combined with Uranus. So him always changing and sometimes having flights of insight, but a lot of times chaos, because of the square, and the square is going into Neptune and Virgo of the U.S. birth chart, which rules boom bust economic cycles. So this whole thing that he's setting up is the Greatest Depression,
Another
and
data,
it's coming this year or next,
another
and it's
data,
from this war.
another data point that proves your point. Okay, with the Saturn aligned with us right now.
Yeah.
But remember, we were talking several shows ago about we finished a cycle with Pluto, and now we're in a new cycle, and this is the 250th year for the founding of the country. All right, now
A reboot of the
Saturn,
United States happens during just to get the astrology right, happens every 248 years. And of course, 250 is part of that. We finished at the end of 2024, Pluto's transit back to its natal position in the US birth chart at 27 degrees Capricorn, and now is slowly moving beyond that. So we've gone through the first cyclic lifetime of this nation, which means now it must die and be reborn,
right,
or die and be dead on arrival.
right, and there's this relationship between the United States and Pluto, and there's also a relationship or an effect by Saturn.
Mm.
Right, Saturn also represents a certain part of Judaism.
Mm.
All right, and the tefillin on the head and the arm, and there's
Oh, yeah, okay.
the shape,
Wrap around the arm and the
right,
box.
and
Yeah,
shape
okay.
at the northern
It's
pole,
black, just like Saturn.
right, at the northern pole. There's
Mhm.
this geometric shape, right? Okay,
True north.
at the true, right? So there's this relationship between Saturn and Judaism. There's this effect that we're seeing in modern time of Netanyahu and his cabinet and Judaism and in Israel, and the effects on Trump and some of our positioning in the Middle East. All right. Now, the Tanya, which is a Hasidic work that was published, all right, it was published in 1796, but it took many years to write. So the writing of the Tanya is tied to this cycle that you're talking about.
Well, the French Revolution too. If it was that was a year, that was a couple years after the First Republic was created, which Nostradamus saw in one of his prophetic prose letters, and actually spelled out that they would think at that time common advent of the people. There'd be the kings would be deposed, the Catholic Church would be persecuted, as it really was in the opening of the French Revolution. And then he said, but the people of that time will think it's a new age, and they will create a new calendar for 1792. Now, it's intriguing because officially the revolutionary calendar was fashioned in 1793-94, but they proacted, put it back to, they wanted to say that it started, to start the count in September of 1792, so it would parallel with the first French Republic of the French Revolution, the first of six or seven, I think six republics since. So he saw that 270 years before, written down. It's not anything that's foggy. It's just like that.
In this second cycle that we were talking about, in this alignment or effect with Saturn, it is similar to the breaking of the vessels. There is an energy that is described in the Tanya that is coming down here. And mankind's not ready for it. But it's the Kav, the energy force, is coming down. Because mankind is not ready, it's going to blow up. And this is going to happen when the gates open up on September 11th of 2026. And there's going to be so much, there's going to be so much turmoil as the vessels are breaking in this plane, on this earth, on the earth, or however you want to describe it, right? But this plane that we're on, that it's going to cause so much chaos and disruption that what we call our modern society is going to end. Now, it's not going to end like in 30 seconds. It's not going to end in 2 weeks. It's going to be a series of things that are breaking, just like how the vessels, there was a series of vessels that were breaking in the Tree of Life. There was these different vessels that would fill up with the Kav and they would break. And the next one would fill up with the Kav and then break. Right? So there's something similar is happening here. Now, sounds dystopic. Mankind's not ready for the Kav. Mankind's not ready for this energy that it's coming down, but it's not going to wait. We can't stop it. We can't pray to stop it. It's coming down. And because we were given a warning to prepare after October 7th. But because mankind wasn't preparing, and we're at the state that we're in right now, I personally think that there is no redemption. And that this thing's going to, all this Kav, all this energy that's coming down is going to break everything. Now we're going to see this manifest in a nuclear war.
Well, yes. I mean, I really I'll be pleasantly surprised if we don't see a few nuclear detonations even next month. Their situation is that you have a similar problem with, the Russians are going to break out in this year, and it's going to break out of being the war of attrition. And then you got all these idiot European leaders in NATO who've also completely depleted their weapons that are rusting in the Ukrainian battlefields. And, when you've got all these Western powers have America, Israel, the NATO, all have set themselves up. NATO should have never advanced on Russia all those years. They broke a promise, and then they're right on your borders and building bases. Last time that happened was Hitler in 1941 doing the same thing, and the Russians didn't do anything. They lost 27.5 million people in 3 years. But they won the war. But it was terrible. And before I forget, it's one of the things I've been doing since I've been published in 1987. It's a theme that I often come back to because I'm a specialist on all the prophetic traditions of different cultures. And that's you've given us a really good introduction into the Jewish angle, the Hebraic angle to this, Paul. And but it's interesting to note that the Hopis have their version of this, and the 2020s are it, the Great Purification by Fire, where there are four worlds that have happened. We are in the current fourth world in the Hopi prophecies, and all the warnings have been fulfilled. I wrote one of my most popular books is a short book called The Essential Hopi Prophecies, where I just took it back to before it got so famous that everybody was attributing everything to the Hopi prophecies. I literally just used the prophecies, not all these embellishments that have come since. That's why the book is short. But it's a very popular book. My work was blessed by Thomas Banyaka before he died. And I was also in a delegation from the Osho commune to actually meet their Osho in Thomas Monganya. I didn't actually go in the end, but I've been the scholar of the three of us that they told me everything had happened, and I'm the person that's giving it to the world. How the Hopi prophecy was seen. My people are the red cap, red cloak people that came out of the east, out of the sky, and were all over the place in the west, and then suddenly vanished. Well, we did vanish. We don't wear our red clothes anymore. We've gone underground. But and the Hopi recognized that. So it was about all of that. So I seem to have had direct involvement with the actual work of this kind of prophecy. So, but I did a book called Messiahs, which looked at all the different messianic prophecies, 37 different groups, all over the world. And it is interesting how this reality of a travail, a purification, which requires all the stuff that's impure to be destroyed, stuff that we identify and cherish when it's really evil and a mess. So all the world religions and all the prophetic traditions have a their own version, interpretation of the things that you're talking about from a Jewish point of view. There's the Christian points of view. There's the atheistic Buddhist point of view, even. And so my book Messiahs looked at that, and it's still out there. You can buy it in used bookstores. It's one of my most beautiful coffee table books that I sketched out the designs and had them do it in England. Um, so there again, back to the theme of alchemy. Even the most terrifying, terrible things are an opportunity to grow. You know, Lucifer means light, but Lucifer became Satan. The base metal sins of our unconscious lives and the way we live it, and our hubris and all that, is the same stuff that makes the gold. It cannot be otherwise. They have an intimate relationship. Heaven and hell have an intimate relationship. Um, and we're seeing the end of a great age, and a lot of the old will be destroyed in it, and it may take centuries to recover from it, but we're in it now, and I can recognize that all these things are coming together in so many different prophetic traditions.
But the thing,
How
but the thing is that I know this sounds kind of really negative, but if you were to be the devil's advocate, all right, and you were to be judging mankind, if it was me, I would have to ask for absolute annihilation because mankind doesn't deserve it
mm,
because we have had so many opportunities to get it right.
mm,
So it's like mankind is almost at the very end of the road here.
mm.
Now, some religions think that there's going to be a savior. You know, different religions have different saviors,
Yeah.
but the real, brass tacks or
Israel has
rubber,
Emmanuel.
the rubber meets the road. Can we honestly say that mankind deserves to live?
Well, if I were
I,
Job and if I were, let's see, if I were Lot in Sodom and Gomorrah, I love the Hasidic story. Osho used to tell this Hasidic story. The angel came down and said, no, the whole place has to go down. And you and your wife will leave, but because they're leaving, they say, well, so anyway, Lot made this is a Hasidic story where he made this he he bargained with the angel and said, well, what if what if there was one person, or well, he started with what if there were a few people, and then he finally bartered him down to, well, what if there's only one person that's pure in Sodom and Gomorrah? Would God save it? So um,
I mean, the way I would take it with knowing the whole story, not just the biblical, but what's happened in modern time. Every time mankind has been given a path to prove itself that it's worthy, it failed. So now it's time to just end it. And
well,
so,
there's
and
a
so this is the point. That This is the issue that I had with people during COVID. They didn't stand up when they had an opportunity. So now it's time to end it.
yeah, well, again, some of these traditions kind of look beyond that. Yeah, it ends. It's like if you're a forest of trees that have gotten all ugly and intertwined, and then it's ended by a great fire. Out of its ashes, a beginning happens again.
Yeah, but I don't know if it's going to be mankind. It may be the bears or the goats, or maybe it'll be an antelope or something. But I'm not sure if it should be mankind.
Consciousness is not a form anyway.
Well, okay, I'll grant you that. But in the physical in the physical
I mean, I mean
organism,
we could be
not
ending. I
necessarily.
mean, I'm not ruling that out. I mean, what will probably happen is that if we just can't make it, we have performed the Fermi paradox. We are in a classroom situation for the human race where that I think a lot of civilizations across the universe have tried and failed. But what will happen is, as a forest is destroyed, somewhere else, another plant will grow, another world. It may be the end of this, but the universe is vast, and the possibilities uh, are many. And I understand the feeling, oh, we don't deserve. But there's almost a little subtle quality of what I would ask God, what is your expectation of us? I mean, you're responsible for this whole thing. Why did you create evil? Why did you create rape and all that? Because that's on you, God. You didn't have to create that. I mean, I remember sometimes that born again Christians came in when I was working in this head shop in Ports of Call, the Prophet, which was it took care of all the occult and metaphysical needs of the South Bay area of Los Angeles and the Latino culture. And it was quite an education just before I went off to India. Um, and these guys came in and said, these two guys, they're talking to me, and I was in my orange robes by then, and they were saying, well, um, there was evil, and what were they saying? And we have to just choose between good and evil. And I said, and the devil's evil, and we got to fight against the devil. And I said, who created the devil? God. Didn't God create the devil? He created Lucifer, but if Lucifer became the devil, who's responsible for creating it?
I'll take it one step further. I'm not so sure that the devil is evil.
Yeah, well,
I mean, the devil seems to be a prosecutor of
yeah.
people's actions.
Yeah, it is, and it's also yeah. But these guys were kind of in that one-dimensional way of looking at it, and I just said, look, ultimately, even if you create the prosecutor, Paul, God's responsible. So God can just take a look in His own divine mirror and ask the question, why did I create all this? Because all of this is His responsibility. Because if He hadn't created it, would any of this happen?
And it was always set up for failure. and we and,
Yeah,
and
of course. Well,
destined
God set it up for failure.
and we were destined to burn.
He plays with his toy people, and like I used to play with my toy soldiers and kill them all and all that. He seems to be a child, and maybe that's why Trump has his dumb luck because he's a precocious 8-year-old in a
Not,
80-year-old body come June
you
14th,
know, I know your
and he could blow up the world.
I know your opinion of Hitchens. Christopher Hitchens. I know the
Oh,
bad.
well, I also loved a lot of what he said.
Yeah, but one of the things that he said when he was dying from
A
cancer.
great writer.
Right. Oh yeah, absolutely a great writer
Yeah.
and a great orator.
Yeah, oh yeah. I mean, I dig him, but I also nail him.
You
It's too
know,
bad we never had a
no,
debate.
so one of the things that he said that I thought was really telling was is that when he was dying from cancer, there was no hope. He was going to die,
Yeah.
and he said that he didn't understand when people had cancer why they were saying, "Oh, why me? Why me?" While he stated, "Why not me? There's nothing special." And this gets to the very essence of what we're talking about tonight. Do people really deserve to have the freedoms that they have? They didn't fight for them. They didn't protect them. Do people really deserve life? And maybe the great prosecutor is right. No one deserves it. And that includes me and everyone that I know.
I would just
Nobody
sim-
deserves it.
I would just simply say, it's that's why I call myself a luminous atheist. I often find that atheists, if they're not dogmatic about it, like theists, are. I mean, Buddha, a lot of the greatest religions are atheistic. Buddha, there's no personification of God. This is my experience of it. There's godliness, though. And the godliness is in, if people could look inside, they will find that all these dramas and all these things that happen are part of a great play. But if it can be witnessed from the source, that witness, that divine spark, is neither good nor evil. It's it's beyond those things. Inside of us is that source of God that we mistakenly personify, in my experience. Personifying means that we turn it into an imaginary friend or foe, uh, a a the prosecutor as well, and all of that's happening. But um, it's this world is a classroom, I would say, and it's a place where Um, and the strange thing about something that's so universal is the complete awakening of it, that universality can only happen one individual at a time. Individual, I say, is an undivide you all. It's like revolutions are really react illusions. People are reacting to the czar, so they replace him with a greater czar called Stalin with the red banner. you know, or they replace the Chinese emperor with Mao, the greatest emperor of them all, in a way, even though he wore the bad clothes, the simple clothes and all that. Um, Being in India, I had my eyes open to a lot of very interesting and Zen, a lot of interesting ways in which um, even God's part of that play. Even God's a changeable um, state. And you see it in nature. If everything's green and wonderful, then an eruption happens and wipes it all out. And then you could get all pokey about it, like Varang has in Fire and Ash. We lived beautiful, but then the fire volcano came and burned everything, and Ewa did not help us. You know, um, it's uh, it's a bigger story than any of our minds and our hopes and fears can wrap itself around because there's something deeper in us that is not our minds and hopes and fears. And I am facing the potential of nuclear war, you know, happening maybe next month. If not, it will set in motion a 2 years of travail because Saturn, which is anchoring this whole, Saturn's got Neptune, mass mind communicator, Saturn, the reality giver, or the sin exposer. Mars, beginnings. Mars, in this case, is a beginning that will happen after the endings. You know, a lot of 12th house stuff into the first house of Mars in that kind of relationship in astrology. We are now at a point where a lot of things that we've been doing are going to collapse because we've gone through a state of entropy. I mean, the American people fought for their freedoms. The people were far more related to their responsibilities as citizens. What we can all learn from this situation is how we got this messed up. And then from that could be the beginning of something new. Because the Hopis say, you know, the great purification of fire is to purify and burn out the fourth world and destroy it. And when that's destroyed, what is left is the survivors will create a new fifth world, which is far more balanced and spiritual and harmonious with nature. This is also a common theme in all different apocalypse. You have Jerusalem coming out of the sky. You have the temple coming out of the sky for Emmanuel. You there what I'm see I always seek I take note of the details, but I'm always trying to seek the core essence of it, which they all share. You know, the Hopi have there have been four destructions of the world in human history, and then people came and started a new cycle, and I think that's what will happen again, because I see it in nature. I see it in nature of the universe. The whole universe has a big bang, and then it lasts for what, maybe 20 billion years, and then it dies, and then gets breathed in again. There's there is there are many life cycles to deal with, not just in our world. And there are so many other worlds and civilizations out there and religions out there in existence. Um, that, but they all rotate in a cycle of life and death around an axle which does not exist at all. I close with this. I'm using the quote again, something Osho said in um, 1983. He rarely made a public statement because he was in his 3.5 years of silence, but he made a public statement. And actually, in 1983, it's the one Cuban Missile Crisis moment that most people missed, but it was probably even closer than anything that's happened before. That was the latter half of 1983. Andropov, the Soviet premier, thought that Ronald Reagan, when he was talking to all the evangelicals, when he made the Empire of Evil speech, had lost his marbles. And the Soviet Union, for the first time, was considering, against Soviet nuclear doctrine, a first strike attack on the United States because they thought this was the beginning of that. Reagan has gone nuts. He's going to strike us. So the Politburo was really looking at that. Now, Gorbachev was his protege. Andropov's protege. And Gorbachev said, I think he had a whole gaggle of crazy evangelicals to talk to, and I think he was putting on a show for them. And I don't think he's going to do that. And Andropov was a good leader, Soviet Union, one of the old creaky ones at the end. He accepted it. Now, it's one of my first successful predictions was at a time when it was not, it was really a left field point. When I looked at the Gorbachev, I said, oh, he's going to be this new premier of Russia. And at the time, it was like a long shot. And then he ended up, that's one of the times where I started getting encouraged by, oh, I seem to be getting that. The guy after, and I made a prediction in the Rajneesh Time article, one of my first publications I started writing when I was on the ranch, and I'd write about prophecy. And I said, well, Andropov will die before this year is out. He will be replaced by a guy who will even last less, and then the third person will be Gorbachev. I said that in December of 1983, and about 2, 3 years later it happened. Um, so
We're getting to that point where we have to.
yeah, anybody has a question or a comment?
No, no, not. I
Okay,
mean, there's people agreed, disagreed with what we were saying,
of course. Well,
but
that's fine.
I just want to remind the audience that in the description, please click that will take you to John's website. Take a look at his website. Make sure that you look at his periodicals, and perhaps you may want a reading from John. He does individual readings, so if you can sign up for that, I would greatly appreciate it. John, if just quickly, if you can just describe a little bit about the readings and the periodicals, and then we'll shut it
I
down.
would I would say that in the next few weeks it would be I would invite many of you to become subscribers to the Hogue Prophecy Report. These times are so pivotal, the most in my entire life, that things are really coming to a head, and it's good to get a different insight and at least understand the blow and respond to it positively, which is always possible. Um, so if you subscribe in the next before the end of the month, if you subscribe before this new bulletin is out, and you put in the note when you do at PayPal that you put in the memo line that you want, put February article, or just say you want the previous article, because it would be good for you to get the what I just released a few weeks ago, which really looks in detail about the astrology and all this that is going on, and how these are really decisive times for great change and upheaval that are coming. And also I'll be talking more about the Noah's Ark of Consciousness. I'll finish with that because the 1983 Osho said um, that it had come to a crisis point, that the human race, as it is now, the Earth cannot tolerate its unconsciousness. So, this is a variation on a theme. You know, now Osho's being the prosecutor, and saying, and he talked about many things that have happened, about how the climate would go out of control, how there would be floods and fires and floods and famines and things that we had not seen since biblical times. And he said, and people will be seeking a Noah's Ark, but there will be no Noah's Ark. There will be no way outside to get you out of this mess. But there's the Noah's Ark of consciousness. And that's what I teach, he said. To go in, the only way out of this mess is in, to the very source of your being. And basically, that the Noah's Ark is consciousness itself. And you are conscious. You cannot be otherwise. You can be a Christ-like person pretending not to be, because it's your very nature to be Christ conscious, Emmanuel conscious, a Buddha pretending not to be. And society has taught you to pretend not to be. And when you can just accept as a hypothesis that you are the very source of all divine things, just as a hypothesis to be tested through witnessing, 24/7, witnessing your mind, your body, your emotions, the people around you, certain techniques that I've been taught from Osho. I could share them with you if you want. And the basically, um, when you start to see the pretending not to be things, pretending not to be the things that you cannot avoid being, the very source of the divine. If you go deeper into witnessing without judgments for or against what you're seeing, and just let it go by and see it in its full nature and let it pass away on its own accord. That which is witnessing it, the pretending not to be, is the truth, the eternal truth. That's the hypothesis. That that is your utter connection to the divine source. It's in everything, but not of anything. It is everywhere and nowhere at once. You were brought it into the world as a child, but because you were innocent and open, and your parents, priests, politicians, and pedagogues who had lost the spark forgot about it, as often happens through conditioning, they, in unconscious but well-meaning ways, helped you forget it too. By saying, okay, for you to survive in this world, you're going to have to play a game. It's a really great game. Oh, what game is it? Says the child. The game is pretend that you're not a divine spark. Okay, and then you'll love me and feed me. Yes, you'll be able to be in our society and you'll be able to cope with it and live with it. But you've got to forget that you're a divine spark. You just won't make it if you don't. Okay, I'll play the game. So you play the game, and children are total. They play. So I played the game that I was not a divine spark, and won the game. I forgot that I was not a divine spark, and I also forgot it was a game. And so this metaphor is to kind of point out that meditation, as I've learned it from Osho, is about relaxing back into the witness that you have forgotten by watching all the pretenses that life have put in yourself to make a personality. Person means persona in Greco-Roman word, which means whispering through an actor's mask. So to have personality is the problem, and you forget what's the source of the whispering. And it is as simple as that and as ordinary as that, that this is, I contend, the very source of things that no apocalypse or destruction or end of the world can touch. You've always been that, you've always had it, and because it's so ordinarily your very nature, that is why we miss it, because we're taught to look for it. You can't look for what you already are. So the whole play is to relax and come more and more in the center and begin to see what you've lost. You cannot lose. And that's why in this kind of a Zen state, walking in Zen, sitting in Zen is the famous statement. You know, you flow with the harmony of the isness, and you live in the world, and whatever fortunes or misfortunes come are not touching this. And even at the moment, because it's a Japanese proverb, even at the moment when the sword is unsheathed to bring your death, the man of Zen is smiling. So even if World War III is coming to destroy this world and our societies and our problems, poor old troubled earth, I will face it smiling.
Okay, well, we'll end it there. So everybody that's listening, please make sure that you click the link to John's website and take a look at what he offers, and please help out. We're going to do another show in 2 weeks, but I think it's really important to understand that we're at a fork in the road in this
Yep.
world, and that if things don't de-escalate soon, it's going to escalate, and the probability of having something happen that is worldwide has increased. So
Yes.
so stay
And
tuned.
it will go on increasing um, throughout April into May. But April is going to be the decisive thing of this. It's going to be like nothing that happened before in the Cuban Missile Crisis or anything like that, and it's going to hopefully scare a lot of us straight.
Mm-hmm. And I look, I just want to add one other thing before we shut down. J, JFK during the Cuban Missile Crisis was at also a fork in the road, and there were people
Yeah,
around him that were saying, well, maybe we need to use nuclear weapons against Russia
yeah,
because of Cuba, and you had other people that were trying to de-escalate it.
yeah.
But the thing is that JFK was a smarter person than Trump,
Oh
just
yeah.
flat out smarter person and more intellectual. Now, obviously, Trump is luckier than JFK. I mean, JFK didn't survive the assassination. Um, Donald Trump did. So Trump is a lucky guy. But the thing is that maybe his luck is going to run out. And
Well,
if
it
his luck
could.
runs out, we're all in danger. And there's a serious problem here is that we're at a situation where we don't have a very intellectual person making the decisions. We have a person that has been going to the casino so many times and winning and winning and winning, and he's been drunk on his winning. Now I voted for Trump 3 times. I'm a Trump supporter, but I'm scared about what is starting to emerge.
Yeah.
And so I'm just going to leave it at that, and we'll see what happens.
So are a lot of people in MAGA, and a lot of people who crossed over from the Democratic Party who made it possible for Trump to win the second term. And they're mostly Gen Zers that yeah, and he's completely disconnected from them.
Most of the people that are listening on this show probably would have never been born if the Cuban Missile Crisis went the wrong way.
And I lived through the Cuban Missile
Yeah.
Crisis. It
So that's
ended on my seventh birthday, and it shocked me so deeply as a child that that's my whole life's path has been traumatized and lifted through what happened to me in those 13 days.
right.
So here we are again.
Okay. So we're at that point where we have to shut down the show, but we're going to do
Yep.
another show in 2 weeks,
Yep.
so that we're not radiated, and please join us. But thank you everybody that was watching and also listening on X Spaces. I apologize if I didn't get to your questions. Please listen next week and raise your hand and I'll get you on.
Or
Or
also email me, everybody. I answer all my emails eventually. So, email me at talkwithme@hogueprophecy.com if you've got a question, because a lot of your questions and comments actually inspire some very interesting, surprising responses that often become articles and things like that. So talk with me, all one word, at symbol, HOGUE P prophecy, PROPHECY, all one word, all lowercase. And I so you can also do that too if you really have a question you've got to get out now. And we'll see you in 2 weeks. It'll be a
okay,
very different world in the next 2 weeks.
I think so too. So thank you everybody for watching and listening, and see you in 2 weeks. Bye bye.
Bye bye.